VW has just released a new 7-seat SUV. It's this, the new VW Tayron. And first, let's explain what it is. And that starts with talking about the VW Tiguan, which of course is the German manufacturer's big selling SUV. The latest model is the 3rd generation Tiguan. It's been around for about a year now, and in previous versions of that car, we also had the Tiguan Allspace, which essentially was the Tiguan, but a little bit longer with 2 extra seats, making it a 7-seater. But there will not be a new Tiguan Allspace. We will not see that name again. And instead, the 7-seat gap in VW's lineup is going to be taken up by the Tayron. And VW wants to give these two models different names and not just call this the Tiguan Allspace because, in its eyes, it definitely doesn't see this as just a Tiguan with a couple of extra seats. Perhaps confusingly though, in China, this will be called the Tiguan L Pro, and in America, it will just be called the Tiguan. But to be fair, the version of this in other markets will be slightly different. But is this really so different from the Tiguan?
Well, in the looks department, no matter what VW says, the two cars are very similar. There are some differences. For example, the Tayron has an illuminated VW badge at the front and at the rear, which comes as standard on all versions of this car and isn't available with the Tiguan. And at the back, because of the extra length and larger boot space, it does have slightly chunkier styling. Still, they might not be identical twins, but they are certainly very closely related.
But while the styling might be similar, the thing that really separates the Tiguan from the Tayron is the fact that in this car you can have 7 seats. But not every single version gets 7 seats as standard, which is a little bit strange considering you've got the 5-seat Tiguan, you can have a 5-seat Tayron, and then there's a 5-seat Touareg as well. So having all those 3 5-seat SUVs together in one lineup seems a little bit cluttered. Now, the Tayron is bigger than the Tiguan, and in terms of the wheelbase, which is the distance between the front and rear wheels and really is the measurement that gives you a good indication about how much interior space there is, in the Tayron it's 111 millimeters longer than it is in the Tiguan, which isn't hugely significant, and in fact that's almost half the distance between the previous Tiguan and the Tiguan Allspace. But the new Tiguan is a much bigger and more practical car anyway. So all in all, it means that you definitely aren't shortchanged for space in this middle row. It is very, very good, especially for legroom, and there's loads of space for your feet under the seat in front of you as well. And whether you go for a 5-seat or a 7-seat version of the Tayron, then space in this middle row is exactly the same in both of those models. Headroom isn't quite as impressive as legroom. If you were over 6 foot sitting upright, then you might just feel your head pretty close to the roof lining here. But on the whole, it does feel open and spacious back here. And what you can do to help headroom a little bit is recline this backrest to free up some more space and give you a more laid back sitting position. And on top of that, you can slide these seats forwards and backwards as well. And you can see if you slide them forwards, these two move together and this one moves on its own. Something else handy to point out back here is if you fold this down from the middle seat, then you've got a very big, wide, nicely padded armrest, but you've also got some cup holders here. And the fun doesn't stop there because this thing can swivel either side, because if you've got a phone or a tablet that you're resting here and you want to get a good view of it sat in this seat, then you can move it over there and watch whatever you like on that, which is handy. If this is away and you've got someone sat in this middle seat, then it is raised up a bit higher than the outer 2 rear seats, but it's still reasonably comfortable, and headroom isn't an issue in this middle row because you've got a big sunroof above you. You do have this lump in the floor though, which you've got to put your feet either side, but at least it's not too wide. So space in this middle row is very good, but what's it like in the 3rd row? Let's talk access first, and this rear door is nice and big. It also opens fairly wide, not quite at 90 degrees, but it still gives you a nice big space to easily access this middle row. To slide it forwards, you've got this lever on top of the seat back here, which you can push forwards, and this space that you have to clamber into the back isn't huge, but it's also not particularly stingy either, so it isn't too difficult getting in to the 3rd row. Obviously, it's not an amazingly open and spacious area. By VW's own admission, these extra seats in the back are really only for small children, but an adult can squeeze back here. Okay, it's not hugely comfortable. I can't sit up straight without my head touching the roof lining, but if I lean forwards a little bit, then I can still fit. And if this middle row is as far back as it will go, then there is no legroom back here whatsoever. But where we've got this middle row now, an adult can still fit in this seat in front of me, and I can squeeze in behind. And really, if I was sat here on a relatively short journey, this is acceptable, if not particularly comfortable. And okay, of course, cars like a BMW X7 or a Land Rover Discovery are far more accommodating for adults in the third row, but then they're vastly more expensive and a lot bigger than this car as well. So really this is comparable with a Skoda Kodiaq in terms of third row space. Of course, the two cars are fairly similar underneath, so you'd expect that to be the case. You've also got some glass back here that lets in a bit of light, but there isn't anything luxurious like extra climate controls or even USB ports. So smaller children could sit back here. There aren't ISOFIX mounts though, which is a bit of a shame. If you're an adult, you could squeeze yourself in, but if it was a long journey, you would be pretty uncomfortable. So really, considering this third row is presumably only going to be used occasionally, really the space that's on offer here is fine. With all 7 seats in place, you still have a pretty decent boot in the back of the Tayron. So overall, there's 345 litres of storage, which for some context is more than the space on offer in the entire boot of a Vauxhall Corsa. So even if you've got 7 people in the car, you've still got a decent amount of room for luggage or soft bags or anything like that. If you don't have quite so many passengers, then you can of course fold down this third row, which is very simply done, and then the overall space available to you becomes truly massive at 850 litres. Now that is loads bigger than a Tiguan, which offers 652 litres, and VW says that the extra room on offer in the Tayron is possible because of the extra length that the car has. So there's a lot more room, particularly at the overhang of this rear here, that gives a lot more storage space available in this car than in the Tiguan. You can see there's virtually no loading lip at the front either. You've got some underfloor storage and you can very helpfully prop up this boot floor as well. Plus, there is a dedicated spot for your parcel shelf, which is very handy, particularly on a 7-seater when you might be putting it up and down quite regularly. If you want even more room than this, then you can fold down the middle row, of course, and while they slide 60-40, you can actually fold them down 40-20-40. So that means that you can flatten the middle seat but keep the outer 2 up if you need, or you can just put them all down instead. And it's handy having these levers at the back to be able to do that. And if you go for an entry-level Tayron, then the front passenger seat can also fold down flat, so you can have a very, very long load bay right from the start of the boot up to the dashboard. But if you go for higher trim levels, then you get fancier seats and they aren't quite so flexible when it comes to folding them down. But overall, clearly, this is a very practical car. And if you go for a 5-seat model, then it's even better than this at 885 litres of storage. And by the way, the reason there's a 5-seat version is because if you go for a plug-in hybrid Tayron, then all the extra battery stuff that's needed for that car takes up the space where the extra 2 seats would otherwise go. Inside, up front, you will notice this is very similar to the Tiguan. So you've even got pretty much the same steering wheel with these physical controls, which is great. You've got this great big touchscreen infotainment system on the dashboard here, and a very familiar layout to things, which, to be honest, is no bad thing because the Tiguan has a nice interior that's got a good quality fit and finish to things. So this particular model we're sat in is an elegance Tayron, and it is dressed up very nicely with this nice coloured upholstery. You've got some wood finish on the dashboard as well. You can have massaging seats in your Tayron. There's also acoustic glass apparently to try and improve refinement in here. And practicality wise, it's good because you've got lots of storage under the armrest. You've got this cup holder tray thing that you can remove for even more storage. And there's this dual layer for your smartphones at the front, as well as carpeted door bins. So just like the Tiguan up front in the Tayron, this is really pretty good. Now, what about the engines? Well, in the UK, it's yet to be completely finalised what choice we're going to have, but the Tayron lineup for the rest of Europe will have a maximum of 7 different engines to choose from. So there won't be a fully electric version of this car, but there will be a lot of choice if you want a fuel-powered version. That includes a couple of 2-litre petrols and 2-litre diesels, as well as a couple of plug-in hybrid versions. Whichever model you go for, you'll get an automatic gearbox, a DSG, and we do know that VW's latest plug-in hybrid technology is really very good, because in the other cars that we've tested with it fitted, they've delivered very impressive real-world ranges. The maximum towing capacity for this car, by the way, is a very good 2.5 tonnes. Like other models in VW's lineup, this will be available in 3 different trim levels, starting with entry-level Life. There will also be mid-spec Elegance, and the range-topping version will be R-Line. We don't know anything about official pricing in the UK just yet, but you can expect this to sit in between the cheaper Tiguan and the more expensive Touareg. It will be on the roads in the UK in March 2025. And that is everything we know so far about the new VW Tayron. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see another one, then click up there and make sure you subscribe to our channel. And if you want to find out more about this car and everything else on the new and used market, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.